What a lovely introduction. I don't think we've ever been accompanied by town bells like that before, but the most fitting way possible to welcome you to this wonderful building. FutureEverything has enjoyed a very, very close relationship with the city for many, many years, and we're absolutely delighted to be here in the town hall. It's a building many of us love. It's a lovely juxtaposition of some of the very future-facing ideas we're going to be exploring over the next 2 days and this spectacular architecture. My name's Drew Hemmant. I'm the founder of FutureEverything, and I'm here just to welcome you and to open this event. Those of you who've been here already since Thursday will have already seen a packed festival program. We started on Thursday night, we've had live events every night since then, and we had City Fictions over 2 days, where we put some of the ideas we're going to be talking about here into practice in the city. And quite often, we use the conference as the space to imagine, to provoke, to think up ideas that often form the projects that we then work on for the next year. This time it's been a little bit different. We've been actually trying out these ideas over the last few days, and I'm sure a lot of that energy is going to be channeling into this room, and the discussions we have over the next 2 days can reference some of the things we've been trying out and experimenting with people across the city of Manchester. Before I introduce the first panel and also the theme, a few housekeeping points. This year in the conference, we've really put a lot of thought into the form of the event, and we've really designed it in a way that we hope is going to really fire you up and give you an incredible experience. This is the only room which is sit back and listen. Pretty much every other room, we're asking you to get more involved. The second room, down the far end down there, is hosting participatory workshops, each of them with a different partner, a different lead, a different focus, some really dynamic, exciting events in there. Capacity is limited, so if you want to get to those, get there early, okay? They're going to be very intense, incredibly rewarding events. The next space is a new thing for us. We've got a program of fireside chats. We thought it would be really great to do what you don't always get a chance to do in the main program, which is to get a little bit more intimate and close to some of the incredible people we've got in Manchester over the next 2 days. So we've got a series of leading thinkers giving a longer, reflective conversation that you're invited to join them for. So a much smaller, intimate context and much more in-depth. And then the final space at the far end is the International Business Lounge, and that's a coming together of our European network of innovation partners. There's been innovation contests across Europe, and this is the culmination of that. This is the best of the best, with some really incredible people, and there's a program of events in there as well. And finally, in terms of this morning's session, we've really got one session together with a keynote and then 3 speakers to follow. And these 2 sessions are going to go straight into one another. So after the keynote and after the discussion, we'll invite you to stay with us, and the next speakers will join us on the stage. So that's my housekeeping. Just a few words on the theme. This year we've really seen people really wanting to question some of the key principles of our digital culture. One of those key principles has been around access to tools. Really from the beginnings of digital culture, there's been this idea that to empower people, to open up creativity, to spark innovation, the best way we can do it is to put tools into the hands of people. And this has really driven so much of our digital culture. And part of the inspiration is Over the last decade, we've seen the rise of platforms created and maintained by open source communities of developers, artists. I'm thinking of processing, Arduino, open frameworks, also Raspberry Pi, Smart Citizen. And these platforms have had huge impact beyond those communities. They've really changed the way that many sectors operate and the way we think. And in this morning session, we've got some of the key people who are building these tools and platforms. Later through the conference, we've got some of the most compelling thinkers and minds from design who are really helping us think how these tools and platforms are rewiring society and culture at a deep level and are bringing very novel approaches into rethinking the future and how we make the future together. First, this morning, we've got representatives from different points of the compass. We've got representatives from bottom-up citizen platforms. We've got representatives from industry. And to open, we've got representatives from government. So to introduce the first keynote, which we're delighted to say we've got a double header. So we've got two people joining us from Cabinet Office and Government Digital Services. So Mike Bracken. Mike was appointed Director of Digital in the Cabinet Office and UK Government in July 2011. And Mike's really been leading the transformation agenda in government and really promoting a digital by default approach. Mike's background is as a Guardian, and he was also one of the co-founders of My Society. And Mike's joined by Russell Davies, who's Head of Strategy at Government Digital Services. And they're going to open the conference and introduce to you the theme of tools and platforms. Welcome.
Hello, good morning. Thanks, Drew. Thanks for a lovely introduction. Thank you for hosting this event at this amazing building. And I should also say thank you for having a very large stage, because I think Russell's got the plague or something. He came up with a bad cough. So if he coughs midway through it, it's a good job there's two of us here. I'm going to talk quickly about our work in government. The slides say here about my job title and Russell's. But effectively, we're both trying to do the same thing, which is to create a platform of public services that we can all use. I should start with a little bit of hygiene myself. As Drew mentioned, there'll be very interesting speakers from private industry and other sectors, and we're from government, not typically known for its flair and innovation. So I should give you a warning. There will be no drones in this presentation. Neither will be any biohacking. And there will certainly be no cryptocurrencies. We are, however, going to talk about the far more interesting subject of public services. So I should start with a little bit of exposition. Who are we? What do we do? Then we're going to talk about tools, platforms, and some of the lessons. Russell's going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about what might come next for the future of government. So, who are we and what do we do? We're the government's digital service, and we exist because of this letter. This was a letter from a series of letters from Martha Lane Fox, the then digital champion, and Francis Maud, the Minister for the Cabinet Office. And in 2010, if you note the date, they exchanged letters. And a report was written, and that report was called Digital by Default, Revolution, Not Evolution. And it's important to remember that we only started this journey with those letters, and we really only got going in GDS in late 2011. If you boil down the report to its four constituent aims, they're these. The first is to create GDS, to create a digital centre of government. We've had websites before, but we'd never really had a centre of digital excellence at the heart of government. Then to fix publishing, and that means creating a platform for government, and most of you, I hope, will recognise that as gov.uk. Then it's fixed transactions. We're in the midst of doing that at the moment, 25 of our biggest transactions. And finally, go wholesale, get all this stuff out there in the wider digital economy. So that's our mission. And to deliver on that, we've taken on 5 big tasks. I should quickly run through where we're up to with those just for the full story. So the first is gov.uk. And there should be plenty of sound on this.
I work at the Government Digital Service, and I'm here to tell you about Gov.uk. We launched Gov.uk in October 2012. It replaced the 2 big central government websites, Direct.gov and BusinessLink. The idea was to make something simpler, clearer and faster, something focused on users. Firstly, we took a careful look and worked out what services and information we actually needed to deliver. We thought, for instance, that we could probably stop spending taxpayers' money telling people how to haggle when abroad, or how to identify different kinds of waves. We eliminated thousands of pages that no one ever visited. Then we made sure that the information we were providing was as easy to find and to follow as possible. This, for example, is the page on Direct.gov that tells you about bank holidays. Now, it has all the information you need, and you'd think it'd be hard to do it better. But looking at how people actually use the site, we realised that what most people were searching for was the date of the next bank holiday. So we put that right to the top of the page, big and bold. We've done the same thing to more complex tasks, like working out how much maternity pay you're entitled to. Before, on Direct.gov, you'd need to read all this information. On gov.uk, you just need to answer a few simple questions, and the site calculates the answer for you. In April 2013, we finished moving all departmental sites to gov.uk, together with the sites for Number 10 and the Deputy Prime Minister's office. So instead of every government page having a different design and different navigation, every site now looks and works the same way. At the same time, we've rethought how policy is presented online. Before gov.uk, if you wanted to understand government policy on something like gangs, for instance, you'd have needed to visit all these separate pages. Now, there's a single page for each policy, and all the departments involved share the responsibility for keeping it up to date. You can even subscribe to those policy pages so that you're always kept informed of any changes. And if you're responsible for a particular policy, you can find out how often it's being looked at and how closely it's being read. Today, gov.uk is handling more web traffic than the sites it replaced at a far lower cost, and users get to the information they need quicker than they did before. Gov.uk is not perfect, and it's not finished. It's never going to be. It's designed to improve, to react to user needs. We've made thousands of changes to gov.uk, and we make small improvements almost every day. This idea, iterative, responsive change, is at the heart of everything we do. You should visit us at www.gov.uk. Hopefully, you'll see something you like. Something simpler, clearer, and faster.
So that's Gov.uk, and that really was the major work of 2012. Our other major programs include identity. We are at the moment rolling out federated identity services for government. So very simply, you or businesses can identify yourselves to government and validate that identity via your existing identity providers, your bank, your mobile provider, whoever you choose. That's a radical change for government. Another big program, we are trying to re-equip government with internal technology and also taking on the IT profession of government to make sure our relationship with marketplace is much more healthy and diverse. The penultimate program is measurement, and we're putting data and analytics at the heart of everything that we do in government. And the final one is transformation, and this is probably the one that's going to get the most publicity in the next year or so. We're taking 25 of the most important transactions in government, and we are transforming them to make them digital by default. Overall, our strategy is delivery. Russell, do you want to take it from here?
Right. So as Mike says, the strategy delivery, we've tended to do not a lot of writing papers up front. We've tended to go straight out and start building stuff. But that has taught us things along the way. we thought we'd share some of those with you. And Drew has asked us to talk about and think about sort of tools and platforms and lessons. So we're going to do that. But I do need to emphasize that it feels odd talking at something called Future Something, because we are just doing the basics at the moment. This is not about kind of anything that you're going to see as tremendously innovative or daring or desperate. Because we've started, to some extent, with a few steps back, and we're trying to get up to date. Because government and government technology is at the moment, or has been, a series of silos. It's been, it's a federated system of government. There's lots of departments, there's lots of agencies. They all tend to like to make their own things and to procure their own technology. So a lot of what we've been trying to do is to kind of get those up to date. A lot of people, and Mike will talk about this, cite the Estonian government as one of the best digital governments in the world. Almost everything they do is online, and it works incredibly well. But if you talk to the Estonians about how they were able to do that, they will talk about the fact that their key advantages when they started the system was that they had no money and they had no legacy. As the little quote from a magazine article the other day about them, that basically when the Soviets left Estonia, they took everything with them. And that included the technology legacy. So they were able to kind of start from scratch. More floridly expressed from the same article, there's kind of, is the Estonian reaction to that legacy technology and how they might move on. Also, government tends to assume it's very big and very complex. And certainly in an analog world it is. It's a massive thing, every citizen in the country, lots of processes, lots of transactions, that kind of thing. And therefore tends to assume it needs specialized, complex, expensive tools. That in a digital era isn't as true as it used to be. We do millions of transactions, but that's nothing to what an Instagram or a WhatsApp would do over time. And our investment in technology hasn't necessarily reflected that back to us. This is from a Booz report. You won't be able to read all that detail, actually, about ICT investment of different countries and the effectiveness of that investment. And the UK does not do well on that basis. We come third on that table to Sweden and Switzerland. Sweden, no one's quite sure why that does so well. Switzerland are including the cost of a Large Hadron Collider in their ICT costs. So, but other than that, we're not getting a lot of return for our investment. And this is, I took this picture of Mike. We were down visiting one of our departments, looking at their technology stack. And, to some extent, the feeling is, how do you cope with the complexity of all this stuff? So there's a lot of complex stuff that may not need to be as complex as it is. The policy profession, to some extent, is still stuck in practices, and government is stuck in practices that you wouldn't necessarily recognize. So there's a lot of writing documents, briefing papers. There's a lot of head down, reading words. There's a big contrast when people come and visit GDS that all our thinking is on our walls, on post-it notes, on posters, on things like that. And I always think, if nothing else, if we've made a contribution inside government, at least you can read our slides. The one thing GDS will probably be recognized for inside government is we have big type, and you can read it. And government data, for the most part, lives in spreadsheets, in macros, in PDFs. We kind of, there is a revolution afoot to kind of free data and to get it out there and to make it open, but at the moment it's not expressed in formats it needs to be. This was a tremendous step forward. So the quarterly data summary, which is government data issued in a format that's open that you can use. But the fact that it's quarterly suggests that there's a long way to go. And similarly, though political elites have been forced to engage with digital because they need to get elected, they need to kind of talk to their constituencies, policy elites inside government haven't necessarily engaged in the same way. So this is, you think about how brilliantly Obama did with his election campaigning, how digital that was and how forward-looking that was as a sort of use of technology. That does not reflect itself when it came to launching healthcare.gov. So the use of technology inside government to deliver a service was nowhere near as advanced as it was to kind of engage with the populace at a kind of election level. So we're not starting from now and trying to build into the future. We're trying to do very basic stuff and kind of introduce basic tools of the internet age. So there's 10 thoughts based on that. The first and most important thing is we've sort of changed the organizing principle for how you talk about or how you deliver government services, with a simple thought of it being about user needs, not government needs, which shouldn't be revolutionary, but is a tremendously useful focusing idea. And in making any decision about the services we deliver, you think about the needs of the users first. And we have a set of design principles I'll talk about later, and we're going to steal this from the Olympics to amend one of our design principles, because I think the other thing to recognize is that when we talk about digital, people tend to think that's about services for people who are online. What about the people who are online? We need to recognize that everyone who uses government services is a recipient of government technology choices. They just might have a person inserted between them and the technology. And the choices we need to make can help everyone and make services more humane for everyone, whether they're using the website or whether they're talking to us on the phone or in the post office or wherever it might be. And I think one of the most interesting things is this revolution, this idea of user needs, is starting to take foot in government, to the extent that you're able to see an exchange in the House of Commons like this.
Of the government digital service, which is committed to ensuring that as we reform the delivery of public services, they are designed around the needs of the user, rather than has been far too often the case in the past, being designed to suit the convenience of the government.
So, second thing, work on stuff that matters. As Mike said, we've got a big transformation program going on, about 25 services. They are basically represented in here. So this is a map of all government services, the bigger ones at this end, the long tail down here, and right at the end, that's a license to be buried at sea, which is the least used government service. We are transforming half of this top 50, which is about 90% by volume of transactions in government. And that's going to make an actual real difference to millions of people's lives. And make a difference at a kind of important, substantial level. So one of the services we're transforming is this, which is making a lasting power of attorney, which was a complex paper process. So complex that most of the time people had to hire lawyers or solicitors to help them get through the process. We're making that into a digital process so that people can do it themselves more easily. And at the same time, transforming and working with the Office of the Public Guardian, who are responsible for this, so they can transform themselves into a digital organization. So it's not just an important service, but actually you get important stuff out of it. One of the things that happened as this service went live is that the call center, dealing with inquiries about this, called us up and said, we need to do something. Something's happened that's never happened before. We need your help. It's kind of, what's that? It's, well, people are calling us up with positive feedback. And we've never had that, so we need a positive feedback button to add to the response sheet, so we had to add that. So the fact that a complex process is getting positive feedback is kind of a good sign about the stuff. Start the hard stuff early. There are big, complex things in government that need fixing. Again, the healthcare.gov issue in the United States, the reaction to that, to some extent, was to throw some elite techies at it. But what became clear very early on was that it's about more than that. It's about procurement reform. This is Eric Gunderson, who was responsible for one of the bits of healthcare.gov that actually worked. But he recognized that this wasn't about just a one-off failure. This was systematic in the way government procures technology and its relationship with technology. Which leads to the fourth point, which is about no more big IT thinking, in a sense. If the way to avoid big IT failures is to avoid that big IT thinking. Our supplier base used to be here. It's a map of the UK. And this was a limited range of suppliers. What we're now about is a more diverse range of suppliers from all over the country, of all sizes. There's no good size for government IT supplier, but it's about diversity and about getting the best thinking and the best stuff into government. It used to be ridiculous that we were making digital services but couldn't access the best companies in the world, whether they be in, Silicon Roundabout or whether they be in Long Benton in Newcastle, which is where HMRC are putting digital skills, or whether they be in Swansea, which is where DVLA are putting digital skills, or here. There's no reason why we can't access these kinds of small, nimble, expert businesses into the government supply chain. That's one of the things we're working on. Big thing for us. Make things open, it makes things better. Big enough that we made a big banner about it. One of our design principles. And the advantage of this are kind of non-obvious in a way. Part of our design inspiration have been Margaret Calvert and Jock Kinnear, who designed the road signs in the UK. Did loads of work about what makes for readable fonts at speed on the motorway. And that's inspired the font that we use on the website. But the interesting thing about that is because they made those and because it's public and open, those design patterns have spread around the world. And we're starting to see the same thing because we share all our code on GitHub. We have the service manual, which is basically this is how you should build a decent public service website online and people can see it. So you're now starting to get emergent patterns coming out so that something that the Ministry of Justice builds, for instance, for booking prison visits, turns into code that other people can use for other things. Similarly, this is the alpha of gov.uk. Again, the code for that was on GitHub. This is the Honolulu Answers site built by the state city of Honolulu. This is the beta of New Zealand's new website, all using the same code. The advantage you get out of that is you get design patterns starting to emerge. So this was really nice to see at an event we had on Friday that the Ministry of Justice did about their digital services. Someone saying that that design language is starting to emerge and it would never happen if we imposed it top down. It's just making it available, making the tools available, that starts to come. I'll speed up a bit. Show the thing. We say this a lot. The old process of government procurement was about writing long documents about exactly what some things should do, describing it in detail, then going procuring it, and then building it. The new process, make a prototype as quickly as possible. So this was a tool for farmers to apply for money from Europe. An old paper process been replaced by a map that looks like Google Maps, something they're familiar with. You build that demo quickly, show it to people, they can start to make a sense of how it works. And show the thing has become a thing that we say now. And so we start making posters. And then the posters start to spread around government. I noticed this the other day. So that there's a sort of, you express these thoughts well and it starts to travel. Similarly, in reflecting the same thing, we say publish, don't send. So we try not to write things in documents on emails. We try to put them on blogs. There are lots and lots of government blogs now talking about how we make these things. We share that in videos. We're making video all the time, explaining what it is we're doing it, how we're doing it, why we're doing it. And as Mike talked about, we have a thing called the performance platform. So we measure almost everything we can. That's the great advantage of doing stuff online, and then share it. So carer's allowance. Again, another really important transaction for a lot of people. This was how many people were using the site when I made this slide on Sunday evening at 4 o'clock. So not many, 7 people. But that's live data you can go and see now, how many people are using the site. You can see whether they're using it on paper, whether they're applying on paper, whether they're doing it digitally, and the digital stuff you'll see is starting to creep slowly up. This is how many people are doing a transaction with DVLA and what form they're doing it in. This is how many people are accessing gov.uk and what they're accessing from desktop or mobile. Again, you'll see mobile starting to creep up slowly. This is our uptime for gov.uk, which is 100%, which is good. Especially considering we migrated all of our site from one set of servers to another in the middle of last week, and we wrote about how we did that. So again, we've shared that in public, so people can learn from that and they can understand what we're doing. We are about no longer outsourcing and de-skilling, but insourcing and reskilling. As I said, HMRC are now hiring digital skills and putting them in places like Longbenton in Newcastle. We're teaching the civil service how to do agile rather than waterfall and to give those people skills. And the ones that I really like, by the end of this year, there will be 8,000 civil servants writing in Markdown. So it's not about complex CMSs anymore. It's about kind of writing in web-native formats. And most importantly, it's not just about networking the services, but it's about networking the people. The strength of the civil service is when it can talk to its users, when the people inside the service can use the tools they need and they want to be able to talk to the people they're trying to serve. So, it's about giving them access to the tools that everyone would use every day to talk to their users, to social media, to whatever it might be, so they can get there. Like I say, it's not revolutionary, it's not innovative, it is fixing the basics. But it feels like once we've fixed the basics, other things might become possible. Mike.
Thanks, Russell. And there's a lot there. A lot of this is in public, so if you do want us to come back to some of this, it will be in the public domain, both the slides and the services. In some ways, that's the exam question answered. If you look at the brief we were given today and all of us speaking on platforms, we have a very quick run-through of our platform thinking and platform tools. But as I said at the start, there's no cryptocurrencies here or nothing outlandish. There's a just very well-executed set of internal tools, platforms and services. So you could ask, what's the big deal? Well, I think the big deal is what comes next. We've answered this question. The first thing to say, and to say again and again, is the future of government won't come from us. We're not elected officials. We don't have that choice, nor should we even begin to make it. The point that we're making, though, is that if we don't do some of the work that we're doing and can continue to develop those, there may not be a future of digital government because there's no enablers inside the system. There are effectively no platforms. Because what we have learnt in the last 3 years is the future of government is not going to come from a finely crafted Word document that comes from Whitehall or Brussels or Washington, D.C. or somewhere else. A beautiful policy paper is not going to create a future government or a future digital government. It'll help, sure. But the actual government services and government, this network effect, will emerge from the places where government actually gets made. Because the critical thing to remember, and looking around this building and this city at the moment, is a reminder that civic infrastructure gets made on the ground, usually by people who need it. So it tends to come from the places of highest demand. There is, before we rush into our digital future of government, a nod to the past, more than a nod to the past, because we can learn from those who've gone before. I'm sure you'll all know who this is, James Brindley. He was a famous canal engineer. And in parts round here, like this, he was one of a number of people, probably one of the most famous engineers, who knitted together canals. He built canals, and I'm from the northwest, and I sort of used them as well. The point about Brindley is that he realised 2 points that all people who make civic infrastructure and civic platforms know, that you should network what already works. The northwest of England is a fine testament to that, in terms of knitting together bits of infrastructure that are already there to create a growing economy and a growing infrastructure. Or you could put it in more sort of tech-savvy terms, small pieces loosely joined. And from these small pieces, a network emerges. And this is where the digital future gets to the heart of the government conundrum, I suspect, because what we found out is there is a sort of Punch and Judy show in government between this view of is it centralised or decentralised. And actually, Brand's famous network map shows it's neither of those. This tooling that we're creating and this network that tooling then begets is a distributed network. And we talk a lot about software terms and you hear them bandied around, but we very rarely talk about government as a network. And I feel that we must do that more often, because whatever we need to do in future, whatever our political masters desire is the right policy that we want to pursue, it's got to be delivered and implemented quickly and in an efficient and agile way, and a quick and cost-efficient way for our users. And that won't come, as we found out, from very large-scale, multi-year centralised services. It often doesn't have the ability we don't have the ability to do all these locally and duplicate them in some ways, but there's got to be a network, and we've got to get the best of both local and central government to work on that. Another lesson from the past is this guy who's the current fad for beards. Obviously he would have outstripped that by some degree. Fantastic beard. And that, of course, is William Bazalgette, and he built the sewers. Now, I'm assuming that we all know roughly the history of that famous piece of infrastructure. Two interesting things about Bazalgette when he looked at the sort of digital challenge we're facing is he built massive capacity. He had huge amounts of wisdom, really, in thinking the long term. Now, Bazalgette built the sewage system under London. The task in hand was to fix cholera, to solve the cholera epidemic and fix the sewers. And he solved that task elegantly. But he also had the wisdom to understand that there were more challenges like that to come. And he built massive capacity, so much more than actually needed, and he engineered it. And because he realised that actually the future of London, what it was to become, he didn't design the future of London, but his platform enabled the future of that city to grow. So platform as an enabler in government is crucial. But what the genius, I think, of Bazalgette was that he also understood that as well as being enabling many futures, it had to have beauty. And this is a place called Crossness in Kent. For those of you who haven't studied it, the sewage system, he built 4 base pumping stations around London. And because the sewage system was just utterly transformative to people's lives, people used to want to see it and appreciate it, but you can't really appreciate a sewage system because it's underground. So he built these follies. There's a few pumps there, but effectively the rest of the building is folly. And people used to have a day out, go to the sewage system and go, what a lovely sewage system, fantastic, and then go home. And it was a day out to look at the sewage system. The point about it is he was extremely clear that things of great public utility always should have some beauty, because they should be appealing and be understood. And the value that they created should be allowed to be appreciated by all of us who've paid for it. So he made our tools and our platforms beautiful. And he did that 150 years ago. And you could argue that that was hardware as a public service. Because we talk a lot about software, but in the Industrial Revolution and the growth of this country, public servants have really been putting hardware as a public service in the public domain. So from Brindley and Bazalgette, there's a parallel to what we're doing here. I want to say we're doing this network of people across the government. And I'm delighted to say after 3 years, our work on tooling in the centre has helped sustain a growth of activity in the various hubs around government, and we're now seeing that network come together. In Reading, DEFRA, our colleagues who look after agriculture, are applying agile transformation to the Common Agricultural Policy. For those of you who don't know the sector, that gives away hundreds of millions of pounds of European money every year and is a huge underpinning of the agricultural sector in this country. And to take that whole service and create a platform for farmers rather than have to ask them to do with multiple levels of government and to do it in an agile way without massive procurement is a huge step in the right direction. In Swansea, our colleagues in DVLA are creating more innovation around motoring services. You can check your own driving licence online, check out your penalty points, link your licence, update it, and so on. And they're also helping sustain and develop new innovation in the industries, in the insurance sector for motoring as well. And in colleagues in Newcastle and London in HMRC are using the exemplar services to transform the architecture of our tax system, to make that a single, or as much as possible, a single place where all your tax affairs are online, and get away in the long term from a reliance on a one-time tax hit every year and trying to bring the tax system into a real-time service. And here in Manchester, our colleagues in the Ministry of Justice are about to start transforming courts and transforming some of the buildings of this era into more modern buildings. So this network effect is happening, and it's not just happening in the UK. The great thing about this job is seeing this happening internationally. This is the Estonian Prime Minister using digital services to talk to people in real time in parliamentary sessions. This is Tom Steinberg. He's a genius. He started My Society, and he's been at this for 10 years in this country, and now his services and My Society services are rolling out around Africa and the rest of the world. An organisation called Code for America, this is Jen Polka, who's currently in Washington, D.C., and is getting Code for America to do this sort of stuff in cities all over America. Other people you might not know, Santiago Siri. This is a guy in Argentina. He started a political party because he was so fed up, called the Net Party, and started creating services in this way. This is his partner, Pia Mancini, and she did something even more radical, which is actually to create an operating system for democracy. It's literally called Democracy OS, and I'd encourage you to check it out. People like Hernan Moreno. Hernan Moreno wired up the entire continent of Latin America by making everyone call every technology term the same thing. He literally invented the white book, which is a way of making all services interoperable, simply solving that problem of naming conventions. These people are working in isolation often, but what they're doing, they're linking up government services. And from this linking up, from this network effect, we are seeing a new civic infrastructure emerge. Slowly, but it's emerging. It's emerging in the UK and internationally. The characteristics of this are it's open, user-focused and quick. And it's focused on people, not policy. Or, to put it more technically, it's software as a public service. We simply do not talk about software as a public service anything like enough of we should do. My word, we buy enough of it in government, and we should think about it as a public service. But that's a bit of a mouthful, and it sounds like another one of these tech marketing things, so we're calling it the Gov Stack. And you'll hear a lot more about that, I hope, in the years to come as we layer all our technology together and create a stack of services for government. So they're going to finish now, but I'm going to ask the question, why? Why do we do all this? Why can't we just do the tooling and have done with it? And you know, if you did nothing but the tooling and made government better, that's a good thing to do. But why link this network up? Why have these services? Why put them in a stack of technologies that everyone can reuse and add to and share and develop? And I think it's because of this. I think it's because we have a one-time chance. We have a one-time chance to move from a Victorian infrastructure of government, or literally I'll build some fine Victoriana in government, but our buildings give away how government is run. We still have a Victorian legacy about how we operate government at every level. And it's a chance to move to a more modern government. This is a Reichstag building. It was designed by someone who used to work in this building, I think. And the interesting thing here is completely transparent, it's open, and it's arguably how government should be made and how they should work. If we can do that to the physical infrastructure of government, why can't we do that to our technology, our digital services, our tooling? So that's our aspiration, and I hope in the next few years we'll see this network really emerge all over this country and increasingly internationally. There is an ask at the end of this. We're always hiring, but more than that, you can come and join us because we want you to take part in this. We'd like everyone to take part in this. Come and join us in Manchester. Next week, our colleagues in MOJ Digital will start transforming the court service with a small alpha service and discovery up here. You can follow more about it on this blog. If you're interested in doing so, please join us. That's all it is from us. Thanks very much.
Do you want to get straight off?
No, I'll do questions if you want.
Just take a couple. Yeah, okay. We have a few minutes for questions. As it's the morning, we're going to give you lots of talks the morning to get you warmed up. But a couple of quick questions. In fact, let's just take two. And I know Mike's going to get off quite quickly. So do we have any questions? Oh, okay, we'll just take one question then.
Okay, thanks. It's Luke from Carbon Culture. Mike, you were talking about you're reflecting on how GDS believe that things should be beautiful and should have future capacity in them as well. And the Victorian infrastructures that you said have those things in them. The way that government procure at the moment typically doesn't allow for beauty, doesn't allow for massive future capacity. So I was wondering if you could reflect on the difference between how things were done then and how you're hoping they might be done now.
Well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, obviously. I think government certainly does allow for beauty, but beauty of certain sorts. And if one walk up and down Whitehall will tell you its favoured view of beauty for a long time has been a sort of late Edwardian Baroque view of beauty. I suspect that one of the great things about tooling government up in a way that's beautiful and accessible and usable is that it puts user thinking at the heart of government, because government, if left to its own devices, like any large organisation, will talk about itself and think about itself in its own terms, and we must put that, must allow it to think about it in user terms. I think that there is a huge opportunity for design thinking and user thinking at the heart of government. We've shown that recently in the last 2 or 3 years, but I think our aspiration is that when we think about things that are, if you like, in our control, things of the tooling that Russell showed, we can make those beautiful. I'd like to think we aspire to making, I don't know, motorway bridges and other such bits of infrastructure as beautiful and usable as yourself, and that design thinking and that thinking beauty certainly isn't there at the moment, but we have to start somewhere, so let's start with our digital estate.
The thing I'd add as well, specifically to the question of procurement, is we just need to get away from the idea of procurement and towards an idea of commissioning, and that will necessarily have ideas about future capacity built in, and hopefully also give people scope to make something that has an appreciation of kind of something that looks good to users, if nothing else. I don't think we're ever going to put ornament ahead of function, but hopefully we can make something that looks nice at the same time.
Okay, thank you. I know Mike's got an engagement next door, so I just want to pick up please, thank you very much. If we could thank Mike and Russell, that'd be great.